Bună ziua, domnilor și domnilor! Ne aflăm în biroul domnului Paulo Rangel, unul dintre oamenii cheie din Parlamentul European, din familia popularilor europeni. Vom vorbi despre construcția europeană și despre provocările cu care astăzi se confruntă Europa. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in Mr. Paulo Rangel's office, member of European Parliament and one of the key persons of EPP family, talking in terms about thinking of a strategic development of Europe. Mr. Rangel, first of all, thank you for letting us having this interview.
Well, I thank you, and I'm really very happy to see that I can communicate also with public opinion in Romania, that naturally is a country that says very much, is very much appreciated, I would say, by other countries like Portugal, that is my country, because it's a Latin country. We have a lot of Romanians that work in Portugal, and there's a very strong similarity, I'd say, between our languages, because they have the same sound that is not really like Spanish or Italian or French. So sometimes people ask me if I'm Romanian or the country, so to Romanians if they are Portuguese, because the sound of the language is very, very near.
Well, I must recognize at the beginning that I was impressed about your knowledge and proved by reading our website, CaleaEuropeana, trying to follow the last news that we published on our Facebook page.
But I'm not studying Romanian. It's only when you read almost all the Latin languages, then it becomes easier.
Well, Mr. Rangel, because we are talking about similarities in finding some common issues in our languages, how do you think it's the language that Europe is speaking today?
The language?
Yeah, no, the way that we communicate. I think it's something. It sometimes seems to be very difficult to talk. It's not a language itself, but maybe the ideas.
Yeah. So there's not a problem of language, I'd say. The translation system is functioning, so is quite sophisticated, I would say. And a lot of people also have the English as a lingua franca, so it's really a problem of communication of different perspectives, I would say, of different mindsets, that really each people and each country has its own culture, its own history, and so looks at the problems with a different perspective. And so sometimes we use the same words, but we are meaning different things because we have a background that is our national background that really doesn't allow us to really interact, to really communicate. And for instance, now it's very clear that the Western countries have a perspective of the refugees crisis that is different from the Eastern countries, for instance, to give an example. The same was also clear in the economic crisis, where the Northern countries had different perspectives from Southern countries in general. So Europe is really a miracle at the same time to have this table where we have 28 trying to talk every day. This is very good because this avoid, I would say, a history of centuries or more than centuries of conflicts, wars, and suffering for all the European peoples, but at the same time is a very difficult process because there are all these diversity. That is a richness of the continent, but it's very difficult to tackle the problems.
It's the richness or it's the weakness? Because sometimes I think this diversity that we promote everywhere in the world as an asset, sometimes it's an obstacle in trying to articulate a better and a more functional Europe. And I had the chance to join the last edition of a few days ago at Krynica Forum in Poland, and one of the panels was about Pax Europea, is it endangered? And the question is, this issue that we are confronting it's another step in having a better and a more united Europe, or it could be a big problem that we couldn't solve. So which is responsible in this period? We have a national responsibility, we have an European institutional responsibility. Is it shared? Do you have the feeling that the states, the governments and the European institutions are working together or not?
Well, what I have to say here is that I think that this crisis, the migrant crisis, more than the economic crisis, is an opportunity to strengthen integration and to strengthen, I would say, the unity of Europe. Of course, we are just in the middle of the crisis, so we are just beginning, so everybody is a bit surprised. We haven't yet a response. But I'm sure that in this case, this will give an opportunity to create a real, I would say, space of circulation with the borders. I would say first the Schengen borders, but also the European Union frontiers clearly as a European responsibility. Because even countries that at the beginning were very skeptical, like United Kingdom, have changed in a very smooth and discreet way their position. So, because it's clear that this is a threat to all the countries, not only to one or to two. During, I would say, 3-4 years, you heard the Greek, the Italian, the Maltese, and the Spaniard saying that they had a problem. But the other countries said this is not an European problem, it's your problem.
Dublin,
of course. The
care.
Dublin,
Yeah.
yes. But the truth is that now, when it has affected United Kingdom, Germany, Austria, Sweden and Denmark in a certain way, everybody understood that this is an European problem. Even Hungary had already alerted in some circles. Prime Minister Viktor Orban is very, I'd say, very intensely criticized, but it's true. We have to recognize that 1 year ago or 18 months ago, he has already alerted everybody to this problem of the migration problem, that it would come to the Central Europe zone, and not only it would be kept in the Mediterranean. And so here I think that we have a great opportunity to strengthen the European response. I must say that I think that the reason why we have failed in the past, not only in these internal security, home affairs issues like migrants, but even in some problems dealing with economic and financial crisis, is because we have a lack of Europe, of the European institutions. What are really the European institutions? It's the Commission, European Commission, and the European Parliament. The European Council represents the states, and what we are seeing during the economic crisis, and also now with the migrant crisis, is that the role of the European Council, in special the role of the summit, the European Council as an institution, not the Council of Ministers, ECOFIN, the two different things. I'd say they have the indirizzo politico, as the Italians say, so the political direction of. They have been concentrating power more and more, and that affects, in a certain way, an European coherent response, because it's the representation of national perspectives, attitudes. So these leaders, they have elections in their own countries. So sometimes they are thinking not only in the European agenda, but in the national agenda. So it's very important to transfer some responsibilities, especially to the European Commission, and to make it responsible towards the European Parliament.
Well, anyway, after the Lisbon Treaty, it's happening already. But still sometimes we see that even important states, they are thinking about their own population, their own voters, and less about the 500 million inhabitants in Europe. And I think they are having the responsibility for everybody, not for their own country.
The Council should function in this way, as an institution, as an organ that represents the 500 million inhabitants. But the truth is that each prime minister or each president, it depends on the different national systems, is there representing the national interests. It's what have been happening. So, but I believe that such a crisis like this one, with this dramatic situation, because it's a very huge problem for us because we don't have a response, but is a dramatic problem for the refugees that are true refugees, and even from some economic migrants. We, Portugal and Romania, are countries where a lot of people has immigrated for economic reasons. We also have to have a policy for migration, not only a policy for refugees and asylum. When I talk, I'm speaking about immigration, non-European immigration. Of course, in the case of Europe,
we cannot talk. It's not correct to talk about European migration.
There's no more European migration.
Liberty of circulation. It's a different thing.
Freedom of circulation. But what I was trying to say is that countries like our countries understand very well that there is also an issue in the economic migration. So this is not also a taboo, where first we have to face the refugees crisis because they are persecuted in their own countries, because they can't live there with war, because they are in a very, very, I would say, awful situation. But then we have to also to build a policy of migration for demographic reasons and for economic reasons, and because this is going to happen. You are going to see that, for instance, what is predictable now, what is foreseeable in the African continent, especially in the sub-Saharan area, is that they will have in 40, 50 years more than 2 billion people. So these people, they will come to Europe to work because they won't have enough richness to live there. Of course, we can invest a lot there and create conditions to improve their standards of living, but that will happen. So we have to have these two attitudes. One for the short run, and the short run is to have fields or camps for refugees where you can check if they are effective refugees or if they are migrants, and then to reallocate in an adequate manner with quotas or without quotas. I think quotas are a very pragmatic solution, even if they have a problem. That is, we don't know if they are consistent in time, because if you allocate, imagine, 4,000 people to Portugal, you don't know if they will remain there, because they cannot be arrested there. They cannot be imprisoned. So there's some of them probably want to go to another country, and that will be a problem.
Basically, Germany
or Sweden for the social benefits and also for the economy, because they want to have a job and so on.
It's important to have a solution, at least for this crisis, which exposes Europe in one of the most shameful way. We had messages from United Nations, we had messages from international community. It used to be an asset for European Union to show in the world that we are the best contributor in poor countries, the fundamental rights respected in Europe. Now it's sometimes a little bit different image, at least, maybe the reality now.
I would say that is only a problem also of image.
Yes. And credibility on international stage.
Yes, because we are always we are the champions of the standards of human rights in the international community. If you look at Asia, or even if you look at America or Africa, you see that Europe is really a reference. And it's very
at least it used to be.
No, and it is indeed. Still, it still is. Now we have to face this movement, but we should be also a bit more, I'd say, realistic. Last year, we received 2 million people as migrants in Europe. We are not so. This is something that probably is not said, but and we have absorbed these people, and there's a reason why they try to come to Europe, is because they think that here they can live better. They are more, their human rights are respected, and so on. So we are attractive, not only because we have economic conditions, but because we have human rights standards that are quite good in comparison with the others that other countries have. So I'm not pessimistic in these standards of human rights. What I say is that we were, in a certain way, taken by surprise. We are surprised with this. This is not a surprise. As I have told you, countries like Spain, like Malta, like
Surprise after a few years of lots of small surprises, and now we have a big one indeed.
Yes.
Anyway, but because you are representing one of the most important networks on thinking about the future of Europe, and you are talking about some challenges that we are confronting in the meantime, we are still attractive for the people outside of Europe. What should the main families in Europe, European families in Europe, like EPP, like SND, but we are talking about EPP, to make still attractive the European ideas for its own citizens? Because we saw at the last European elections that we saw, and we had a lot of extremism, populists and nationalists entering the European Parliament for the first time. Hardly could SND and EPP and SND actually to form a majority in the European Parliament. It's a huge responsibility to reassure the European citizens that we will have a common future. So which are the main responsibilities in terms of European family for EPP in this area?
My main idea is that we should reinforce and we should strengthen the integration process. So we have to take steps towards a more federalist model in Europe. Because the problem that we have is that we have a lot of real authentic, in the fields we have integration. You see that what happens in Finland has repercussions, as consequences in Romania or in Greece, as in Portugal, in Ireland, as in Denmark, and so on. But we don't have really institutions that are sufficiently empowered at the European level. And I think that is the main answer to these populist movements. They are very, very dangerous. We have a lot of left-wing populist movements, especially in the south of Europe, and right-wing, especially in the north. Now we have also a populist leader, in a certain way, in the Labour Party in UK. So we are seeing that they have success. Why? Because Europe hasn't power enough to answer and to respond. And so the Eurosceptic, the anti-integration discourse is successful. If you see the left-wing extremes and the radicals of right, they always vote in the same way, and their speeches are very, very similar. So that means that their main idea is protectionism, is to try to close the frontiers, to return to the national sovereignties, what is impossible in the society, global society where we are. So what should we do? We should reinforce integration. This can be done without change of treaties in a certain way, but probably this will need a very strong change of the European treaties in the medium term.
This is a very important issue. So you think that in the next years we will have a new treaty?
I think that we'll have at least we'll have a convention. I was not really convinced of that in the past, but now the challenges are so big and the growth of these movements is so meaningful that I think that we have to make this step. Of course, I always give an example that is the Swedish example to respond to populism. The two main parties, center-right and center-left, center-left is now in government, center-right has in 2014 lost the elections. They are a minority government. They have a populist right-wing party with 13%, is the Swedish Democrats. And what they have decided, they have made a pact where they say we are totally different parties. We have different policies for Sweden and for our positions in Europe, but we are committed to avoid during the next 3 legislatures, 12 years, that this party can join the government. So this pact is a very important step to show that there is responsibility in the idea that it's needed. We need
To isolate, like in surgery. That is
not to victimize, but only to say, also to give time to solve the problems, because these problems, some of the issues that the populist movements rise are issues that are real. So that's the reason why they have success. Only the answers that they are only protest movements. They don't have. They are very old.
They are just exploiting the fears and they don't offer solutions. It's obvious. But do you think that the Swedish model, it could be working in the European Parliament between EPP and SND?
I think it already works in a certain way. So here in European Parliament, but there are countries where it doesn't work, and that should be the case. I see, for instance, the case of Spain, where Partido Popular and Partido Socialista Operario Espanhol are in a very tense relation always, and so they don't have a regime agreement for the future. I see that in other countries, so we could multiply the examples. And that gives some force to Podemos in this case, or in the case of Italy, that can give some strength to Beppe Grillo and Cinque Stelle, and so I think that we should really have, it's not to have a coalition government like you have in Germany. That is possible, okay, but only if you don't have a majority and you do want to have a majority in government, what is the tradition in Germany, but it is not, for instance, in Sweden or in Holland. But what is needed is a regime, a long-term or a medium-term, I'd say, understanding.
It's like in computers, a safe mode for keeping working the computer in safe conditions without viruses.
Especially with some time to resolve some problems that are real, that are appointed, are indicated by these movements. They are successful because they rise through and real issues, but they don't have solutions. Or they have solutions like Corbyn that are solutions of the past.
Well, we saw the solutions of Mr. Tsipras anyway, and everybody saw, including the Greek people. There are a lot of interesting subjects that we could discuss, but hopefully we had another chances to do it. Thank you a lot for the interview and for your kind accepting us in your office from Brussels in the European Parliament. And finally, if you'd like to address a message to the Romanian people interested and dedicated to European values, which are basically our readers and followers from CaleaEuropeana.
What I would like to say to the Romanian people in general, but naturally to the ones that are more committed to the European cause, is that Romania is by nature a country, a nation that really is needed for Europe, because it gives a contribution that others can't give. That is a Latin language with an Orthodox tradition, also with an experience of different totalitarian regimes of different kind that were also very drastic and dramatic. And so this overcome of this situation, the remembrance of this situation to put European values at the center is very important. So I say that you can be also mediators in a certain way. You have the capacity to put different cultures in dialogue. And so Romanians can be at the heart of this communication issue that we have identified here in our interview.
Well, actually, we did more than that, because we offered in European Council a president, of course from EPP, which is a German ethnic, and it's not an Orthodox, which it means that an Orthodox people with actually with a large majority of Romanians, of course. Klaus Iohannis is Romanian citizen, but his background of German ethnicity wasn't an obstacle for him to have the highest position in a European country in a period with lots of extremists and populists in some other European countries.
That is really a very, very important example of, I would say, the support that European values of diversity, of respect for the difference, and of the value of the minorities, of the contribution of the minorities to the building of a nation. This is really a very good example. I think that we should finish with it.
Thank you so much once again.